Okay, let's begin. I am Lanice Antoine Shelley, and I'll be your host through constructive, healing-based conversations designed to illuminate the adoptee, parents, and the adoption curious. We center the topics around community, mentorship, leadership, and healing, so you get a multi-dimensional view that is ultimately empowering. These are the voices who could not speak when they were young. Hey y'all, if you've seen me on Instagram, I'm in my summer glow phase and I am unapologetic about it. My hair is luscious. Fun fact, I didn't start properly treating and doing my own hair until I was a grown adult because like many Black adoptees, no one showed me how to do my own hair. And because I love you all so much, I'm going to share with you my hair secret. I'm always on the lookout for things you'd love and things that will enhance your well-being inside and out. We Unique Cosmetics sent me their Moisture Lock pomade and scalp and hair therapy oil from their Metamorphosis line, and it's so decadent, light, and nourishing, fam. This has become a hair routine staple. It has a soft lemongrass scent that people comment on when I walk by or when they're doing my hair because now I have boho locks. They also sent me a 15% discount link for you to try their products and hair tutorial service. And Unique Cosmetics is Black owned and operated by a mother and daughter duo dedicated to helping the adoptee community. Check out the link in the show notes. And this is for all ages, fam. So tell your friends. So come on, embark on a hair-loving journey with We Unique World. From interactive workshops to premium products, they're all about empowering you to embrace your unique hair journey. Because remember, all hair is good hair, especially when it's healthy. Hey you! How's it going? Today's conversation is extremely informative. Author, activist, podcaster, and educative content creator Melissa Guida Richards is our guest. She also guested on episode 6, all the way back in the very beginning, and was a panelist on my 2020 panel series. A lot has happened since we last chatted a few years ago, so it was so much fun to reconnect. Melissa is a thriving content creator on Instagram. I think she has other platforms as well. If you want to know more about birth families, adopters, adoptees, adoption curious, adoptees domestic and internationally relinquished and or displaced people, Melissa knows it all. She is the one to go to. Today we discuss the ramification of separating siblings. We talk about what it was like to be on the Cameron Hall show with her adoptive mother. We go into what it means to filter content through an anti-racist lens, her work in the adoption community, and her strategy to make lasting and systemic change. We also talk about the harm of social media platforms that advertise children and the dangers of pre-birth matching, rehoming children on the internet, aka human trafficking. We discuss what happens with a birth parent in crisis and the laws around their individual rights. Melissa gives us advice on how to protect your children's story when you're a parental content creator and you want to put your family's story out there. How do you do it without oversharing or not honoring your child's privacy? And then we finish with tips on how to not minimize the adoptee experience. I highly recommend that after you listen to this, well, actually, you could do it right now. Do it right now. You should go follow Melissa to stay informed with current events and get a masterclass education on how things, all adoption related, should be handled. Without further ado, let's begin. I love keeping up with you on the social medias, and you're even more present than you were the last time we talked. And so I'm just eager to just pick your brain as to what's happening in your world. But first of all, like, how is your heart? How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Me and my sisters that have been in reunion now for like, oh gosh, almost 4 years now. We were able to meet last May, and our relationship has grown really well since then. And we're planning to go back at the end of the summer slash fall to actually go and visit Colombia for the first time. So, I mean, overall, like things are going well. You know, like as all adoptees, we have our ups, we have our downs, but yeah. So I'm pretty happy.
That is incredible. Oh my goodness. The last time we spoke, so you had just been reunified with your sisters then, I think, and you were testing the waters. And you're saying that now you're planning this huge trip to Colombia. And what city or town in Colombia are you from?
Bogota. There's a really small town that's like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours from Bogota, the capital, called Zitequiera. That's where my family is, and they like their Wi-Fi is terrible. Like connecting with them is such a struggle because it's such a small town that they have to go to the town to get signal, and it's wonky at best. So like we've been trying to talk to our birth mother over there as often as we can, and like we try to WhatsApp, so text. Sometimes it goes through, sometimes it could be a week or two before we hear back.
Yeah, WhatsApp is great for those of you who aren't familiar with WhatsApp. It's a game changer for international correspondence. You've been in correspondence with your sisters. Where are they?
They're in Minnesota. So they were adopted there several years prior to me. I think they were adopted maybe 4 or 5 years prior to my adoption. And so they grew up in the same family with other children. And they've known each other basically all their lives.
Wow. Are you the only sibling that didn't grow up in that unit?
Yeah. Okay. They were adopted before me, and then it was just me and my brother, but he was adopted from a different family. So they're the only siblings that were adopted together. So it's them two, then me, and then all the other siblings that my birth mother had after that. It was after her marriage, and she raised them, and she's been, doing really well since.
Okay. Wow. I have a lot of biological siblings as well. And I found out 2 years ago that we all have different fathers.
Mm.
And so that was a shock.
Yeah, same here. Like we all have different fathers. For my eldest brother and my oldest sister, they had the same. Then it's my middle sister. She had a different father, and then me, I had a different father, and the rest are all from the marriage. So there has been some judgment from like my adoptive family and just like people who hear about my adoption story. They're always asking, well, why does she have so many kids? What this and that? Oh, and then they have horrible things to say about my birth mom. But people don't really understand, and they don't give a lot of grace to birth parents. They're so quick to villainize.
To villainize, to not consider that we all have cultural differences, right? Because in Colombia, that's actually quite common. And it's common in Haiti too. In the West Indies, it's just people are having kids, and they're having kids out of wedlock, as they are here in the States, right?
Yep.
And the same things are happening in the States as they're happening in other countries. They're just a little bit more prevalent, prominent, and in your face in other countries because there's that economic disparity. This isn't new information.
Yeah, and then I think it's just ironic because like adoptive parents are so quick to gain from actions that they judge so strongly, and it's just like the power dynamic there. So that's always been like a frustrating point of like contention between me and my adoptive family. It's how quick they are to judge my birth mother, and yet without her, my parents wouldn't have had the kid that they always dreamed of.
Exactly. So you have to give her some credit, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was fascinating watching your episode on Tamron. With your mother. When was that shot?
I think it was like right in January after my book came out. So like early 2022. Um, like it was a few months after the book came out and it had gotten some press, and I just received an email and they were like, hey, like we want you to come on with your mom. And honestly, I didn't expect my mom to want to do it, but Tamron Hall is apparently her favorite daytime TV show. She never misses an episode. So literally all I had to say was Tamron Hall and that was it. She was in.
And she was game?
Yeah.
That is amazing. I was astonished when I saw that she was on there because a lot of adoptive parents are very secretive about their adoptions, about their feelings, all of that. And so it was really extraordinary to have her in the public eye talking about your feelings about adoption. And it felt like she was validating your feelings. What was your take on it?
I was a little disappointed because they cut a segment of her, like because the interview with her was supposed to be a little bit longer, but they cut it because TV they change things depending on how long they do. So like I think that added a lot more context to it, and like other people were like, well, she didn't really answer the question. I'm like, she did, but they cut it out, and like I wish they got the full thing to see her be like, yeah, I made decisions that harmed my daughter and I'm owning up to it basically. And she was like really apologetic, and like showed how much like my writing has and these discussions that have come from it have helped make our relationship stronger. And so like I'm not going to say my adoptive mother is perfect. She's not. She's a human. She makes mistakes. But I think she's the perfect example of being willing to confront the mistakes that you made in your past when you didn't know or have all the information available, and be willing to grow from that. And that's something not a lot of adoptive parents will do. And so one of the things I was really glad about sharing our interactions with each other in our relationship is to show that it's okay to make mistakes. And what I tell people all the time when I write in my books is like, get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's the only way we can grow together. So I wish they hadn't cut the whole, like more of her interview, because I think that would have added a lot more. But I was glad that, like having a platform whatsoever, even just a few minutes, is like, we don't get that opportunity a lot.
That was massive. And I love that it was you, because you have such a great perspective, a grounded, educated perspective on what's truly happening with interracial, international adoptees. And there are other adoptees out there who are awesome too, but they aren't coming at this work through an anti-racist lens. And that's what's essential, especially if you're a BIPOC person, to filter everything that you post, everything that you speak about through the anti-racist lens, because that is the crux, the beginning, the biggest issue when it comes to interracial adoption. And you face it head on, and I love it. You're just like all in it. Every time I go on Instagram, I'm like, she's at it again, and it's great. And I'm learning and I'm expanding from being exposed to you. And it's so inspirational. And the last time we spoke, you were in the process of writing this book. And now the book is out. What white parents should know about transracial adoption. And I want to know more about it. I know you and I talked about a little bit about the book, but now that it's out, now we can speak freely about the book. So let's hear it.
Yeah. So basically, I said it was the white fragility for transracial adoption, except this one was actually written by a indigenous, multiracial Latina woman who was actually an adoptee with lived experience. And it was really important to me after being a late discovery adoptee and entering this community so late in life at 19 years old. I realized like how much there was like a lack of information. I spent so many nights like up Googling like my circumstances and just transracial adoption in general. And all the resources that I was finding were written by adoptive parents or adoption professionals. So there wasn't really a lot of access to information from the adoptee perspective, except for like Facebook groups where like random people throughout the world were talking about being adopted. And even those groups, a lot of the times it wasn't just adoptees, it was adoptees and transracially adoptive parents and professionals and all sorts of people. And so I just kept scouring the internet and I couldn't find anything. So, I was like, you know what, why not me? If nobody else is doing it, why not me? Like, I have a story to tell. Transracial adoption has deeply affected my family. And every time I would sit at the kitchen table with my father and my mother, and we'd try to have these conversations, and it'd be so difficult. We kept butting heads. And these quick questions where I had would be like, oh, well, why did you choose Colombia? Oh, well, you didn't want me to adopt. Like I'm a horrible person, X, Y, and Z. And it just like immediately blow up. And I'm like, well, why isn't there like something that helps us have these discussions? And so that's what I kind of did. I wrote it as if I would be talking to my parents and like what I wish they had known, like the history of adoption, the ins and outs of identity, their racial identity as white people versus their child's racial identity as a person of color, how that differs, explaining things to them in like thorough ways that also incorporate a lot of peer-reviewed studies that I researched. And I had piles and piles of papers of like I read about racial identity, self-esteem, suicide rates with adoptees, mental health issues, and all this stuff. And so I put it all together, and this is pretty much what we had. And I'm very, very happy with how well received it's been. Since it came out in October 2021, I've had so many amazing experiences, and I have really been pleased with how many like agencies and like people in positions of power who are like CEOs of like companies or whatever are like looking now at adoption and realizing, hey, we wanted to do a good thing, but we are missing a huge aspect here. And we want to hire you to teach our social workers, to teach our adoption professionals. And like, I know a lot of the adoption community always asks me, well, why are you working with them? Why are you working with adoptive parents? Why are you working with professionals? And it's because I believe that in order to make lasting systemic change, we have to involve all people that are involved with adoption. And that is always going to include foster parents, adoptive parents, adoption professionals, social workers, therapists, even like adoption CEOs that we don't necessarily have to like or agree with their practices, but we have to all come to the table together to push for this change. And unfortunately, a lot of this change is going to come where the money is. And so I'm trying to do it in one way. And that doesn't mean your way is wrong. It doesn't mean my way is wrong. It's just we all have different goals, and this is what I'm trying to do.
Hey, I want to share with you something that has changed my life. It's more like someone, my therapist. Why is she so important? Well, because I want to win in this life. I want to break through the carousel of stories I've compiled that hold me back, that keep me from expanding into my full potentiality. Stories of unworthiness, not enoughness, and even stories of questioning why I am here. I also want to stop dumping my unsorted feelings on the people around me and reacting with the same behavioral patterns that keep me stuck. Conversations with my therapist have made me more confident, clearer in my intention, and more centered in my spirit. That is why I am elated that we are sponsored by BetterHelp, where you can, from wherever you happen to be right now, match with a therapist tailored to your exact needs. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. Someone who you can text at any time and schedule online for either a chat, Zoom, or phone call. And if it turns out that your therapist isn't the right fit, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional cost. Visit the link in the show notes, betterhelp.com, when they were young, to get 10% off the first month. You need to click the link in the show notes in order to get the 10% discount. I want to see you win, beloved. Let's do it together. Visit the link, betterhelp.com, when they were young. The question of why are you working with them is fascinating. Because for me, when I think of it, automatically I recognize that adoptions are going to continue to happen. There are certain things that no matter how you look at it, how you spin it, they're going to continue to happen. And what are you going to do about it? So you might as well, if you do not like certain practices, learn how to steer them away from the harm and work within the system instead of without in ways that are not constructive or productive. So I totally get your point of view. I totally understand why you get yourself into these rooms, implant yourself in these conversations so you can steer the conversations and pivot the way of thinking, because that's where the true change happens.
Yeah, yeah. And we have to work with those with the power. And adoptive parents and foster parents, they have a lot of the power here. In order for change to happen, we need adoptive parents to push for change, just as they prioritize other things like the speed it takes to complete adoptions and all the forms and the checkpoints, the home studies, all of that they prioritize getting done quickly, getting done well, and working with the right professionals. But they also need to prioritize things like the ethics in adoption, birth parent support pre and post adoption, as well as counseling, not just for the child, but for the birth parent, for themselves. A lot of infertility counseling. They need to push for adoption agencies prioritize these things, because they are the ones coming in here with the money. They are the ones that need to be there for the adoption industry to work, because without adoptive parents and foster parents, the adoption industry is not going to be a successful business like it is now. And adoptive parents have that power and to choose, like when we go in a grocery store and we say, I want more organic produce because it's good for me and my family. You go and buy organic produce, and each purchase that you make is a vote. That shows where you're putting your money. So if adoptive parents and foster parents are saying, I'm not going to work with these agencies that don't do X, Y, and Z. I'm only going to do the ones that hire their own lawyers for the birth parents, that are only going to do that aren't going to do like pre-birth matching, like things like that. That seem like little small choices can pressure agencies to keep making that continuum and making more progress as they go, because that won't give them a choice to do these unethical things. There will be less people looking away when we're talking about unethical things, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And I want to unpack a few of your points because they're so good. Pre-birth matching. What is that and why is that unethical?
Yeah, so if you guys are unfamiliar, pre-birth matching is usually when an expectant parent is in crisis, and they'll typically reach out themselves, or someone will give them the contact information of like pregnancy crisis centers, and that will inevitably suggest adoption at some point. And then we have these agencies that oftentimes will have these pro and con lists about whether you should parent your child or choose adoption. What could you give your child versus what could an adoptive couple give your child? And then there's usually these profiles. It used to be just like these scrapbooks of adoptive parents, prospective adoptive parents, and showing Jane and Joe and how amazing they are, what's their religion, what do they do for jobs, what do they do for whatever. And then you have this expectant parent looking at these profiles and deciding, who do I want to adopt my child? And so usually they'll narrow it down to one or two, meet with the prospective adoptive parents, and then make a decision to place with a certain couple. And so that's kind of called pre-birth matching, because they're linking up with a couple that is hoping to adopt their child. And so that person will continue on with their pregnancy. They might meet with that couple a few more times, give birth, and that oftentimes that couple will be at the hospital for birth, and the paperwork will be signed as soon as legally possible. Sometimes that's in the hospital, sometimes that's like 20 days later or a few months later when everything is finalized. So that's considered pre-birth matching because that baby wasn't born before that decision to place with that couple was made. In terms of it being unethical, well, we have to think of like many reasons. If someone is considering adoption, typically they are not in the best state of mind. They're in crisis. There might be some drug use going on. And regardless, no matter where you are in pregnancy, there's a lot of hormones involved. And expectant parents are put in very, very precarious situations where from the start, they are doubting themselves, and then society is telling them they can't do it on their own. They can't provide for that child. People are looking down on single parents that need government assistance for housing, for food, for WIC, things like that. And so they are in this precarious situation. And then you have this couple who is typically from money. They typically have steady jobs. They have a home. They have a really strong support network with friends and family. And then we add adoption agencies here who are also often very well financed, who have been doing this for many, many years, who know what words to say to prospective adoptive parents, who know what their worries are. And typically, expected parents in crisis are worried about housing. They're worried about not being able to afford formula. They're worried about how to get off whatever substance use they're having trouble with. And then we have everything mushed into a pot where now we're not only saying, are you sure about this? Like, do you really think you can parent? Oh, let me show you these profiles of these amazing parents. Let me show you now these videos of their families and these perfect little collages and the white picket fence. And then you're just shoving that in their face over and over and over again. And then that person gives birth. Typically, the birth parents and the adoptive parents will be in that room. Sometimes they'll even cut the umbilical cord. So from the second that person is even considering adoption, it's overwhelmingly in support of what the government and what agencies and what adoptive parents think is best for your baby. And there's barely a chance for that expectant parent in crisis to sit there, to have someone on their side, to explain the ins and outs of adoption, to explain that most adoptions close after the first 5 years. Most adoptions aren't like legally binding where you can be open adoptions for the rest of their lives. And birth parents will have no right after once they sign those paperwork. And even if they do decide, they'll sometimes be threatened. Oh, you need to pay back the funds that we gave you for your housing. Oh, how much money that you spent for clothing allowance and food allowance that this adoptive couple gave you. And now look what you're going to do. And then just how people phrase these adoptions that end before they're official. They'll say, oh, it was a failed adoption. No, this parent chose to parent. That was a success. You kept a family together. It wasn't a failed adoption. It was family preservation. And it's just phrases like these that just show how unethical and coercive the adoption industry can be.
I'm taking notes. It's so much to unpack. All of this in the adoption constellation is new for a lot of people. I know that I'm still unpacking and processing just the nuances of it all because I didn't know about birth families needing lawyers. I didn't know about how the system itself considered birth families when it comes to their rights. How does the system consider the adopters when they are pursuing a child? Are they kind of propped up when you think of the apex of this triangle? Is the adopter's position strongest out of everyone's?
Oh, definitely. There's this like initial power struggle that's between like the expected parent and adoptive parent and that is before a couple is chosen. and that parent gives birth, because the birth parent does have some aspect of power there, where they are the ones able to choose the family. If they're choosing to match themselves privately or through an agency, they get to look at all these books and they get to choose. Do I want to consider a LGBTQ plus couple? Do I want to consider an older couple, a younger couple? Do I want a couple that's religious? So they're initially able to state some preferences to a degree. But once that paperwork is signed, any type of power that they have completely disappears, because they no longer have the baby. They no longer can say, like, oh, well, I really don't wish that you teach my child about your Christian religion. I really wish that you guys should have told me that before, whatever they're upset about. And then, oftentimes, like, open adoptions will close because adoptive parents don't realize that babies adopted at birth can experience trauma as well. And so we'll have families that will be like, yeah, I'm totally going to do open adoption. I'm going to have you visit every week, or I'm going to go to you, or I'm going to send you updates and pictures and this and that. And then the child will reach around 5, 6, maybe a little older, and then start acting out after those visits. They'll start showing some behavioral issues that they never had before. They'll start saying, you're not my mom, this and that. And those things will hurt the adoptive parents. And so oftentimes the adoptive parents will be like, oh, well, they're acting out because of something the birth parent is doing. Those visits are no longer conducive to a healthy environment for my child. So I'm going to start cutting off contact, or I'm only going to limit to supervised phone calls during XYZ moment. So all of a sudden that power is gone, because the adoptive parents have all the options in the world, whether they want to keep it open or they want to close it or how much. And then that birth parent signed away their rights. They legally have no more rights to that child and cannot, let's say, like, it was a custody hearing between like a couple that got divorced. You can go for partial or full custody, and legally it's enforceable by the courts. But with birth parents and adoptive parents, once those papers are signed, there's no recourse for the birth parents to change their mind or fight for visitation rights.
I just saw a play in New York off Broadway called A Wolf Play, and it was extraordinary. Its premise is based on an adopted child who gets rehomed. The adoptive parents post this ad on the internet for this child to be rehomed. What do you know about people rehoming children off of the internet? It was such a heart-wrenching story. I was the only one bawling because I think I was the only adoptee in the room. And when I asked them, I just happened upon a talk back, and I asked them if they had an adoptee consultant, and they did not, unfortunately. But I'm curious about what you know about kids being sold on the internet, being rehomed on the internet, and what that looks like, and how possibly we can prevent that from happening.
Yeah, so rehoming is a huge issue right now, especially in the United States. And a lot of kids that are rehomed are actually international adoptees, oftentimes, or in the foster care system. And being rehomed is often a private thing that happens, where adoptive parents can say, I no longer want to parent this child, and then can privately match with another family and then sign over their rights. And a lot of people now are trying to rehome children through social media. So there's Facebook groups like Second Chance Adoptions will literally post pictures of children, say, this is Anthony. This is just a fake example. He's 12 years old. He's a strong Black boy who loves to please his parents. He loves yard work. He loves riding his bicycle. Oh, he really loves hugs and affection, this and that. And they're literally these ads for human children that are allowed to be placed online. Meanwhile, Facebook won't even allow you to rehome or adopt pets. Those posts will get flagged and taken down for abuse and trafficking and safety concerns for animals. And yet we as a society, have deemed it acceptable to put these little ads and put these little, like, almost like fashion shows with children who have been put up for rehoming by their adoptive parents. And the sad thing is, not all, but a good amount of these adoptive parents will go into the adoption, be told a certain amount of information about children, let's say in China or Ethiopia, and then will meet that child in person and realize that they have much more severe disabilities or behavioral issues, and then feel like torn emotionally and be like, well, I don't want to leave this kid here, but I don't think I can connect and bond to be the best parent for them. Will try to raise that child for a few years and end up rehoming that kid over here, and they end up in the foster care system. And so, like, there is very little oversight here. And we don't have exact numbers because a lot of these things are happening behind closed doors. And so there was a famous case a few years ago with Micah Stafer. She rehomed her adopted son, Huxley, after adopting him from abroad because she didn't realize how severe his disabilities were, and decided to rehome that child very publicly because the whole journey was on YouTube, and post all these private information about children. And it really, really is concerning because who is going to take in those kids? And you're stating how many issues they have, or how amicable those kids are, and how much they want to please the parents. And what type of person is going to look at an ad for a kid and be like, a strong 12-year-old Black boy, what can I do? And then we have higher instances of those kids being trafficked, abused, and horrible, horrible things that no children should ever have to go to. But we have such little government oversight, and this oversight that we do have differs greatly between county and state and federally. And then at the end of the day, we have the government focusing on taking away protections like ICWA that actually are like the gold standard in adoption practices that protect children, and instead ignore all these actual instances of abuse and trafficking that go on.
And going even deeper into social media, all of these adoptions that have been highly publicized, what are your views on publicizing someone's adoption when they first get a child from wherever they get the child? What do you think of them posting the photos, posting the journey of them being integrated into the home? What do you think of that being publicized?
I think it's very unethical, and that nobody should make a platform off of adopting a child, whether it's through foster care, internationally, domestic, private adoption, no matter what it is, because that child is a minor and they have oftentimes no choice in the matter. And even if, let's say you're adopting an older kid from foster care, that child is at a disadvantage and they are coming into your home. You are the one who's going to be providing food, clothing, shelter, education. And now you're adding the responsibility of that kid being on social media and having to perform in these platforms that will typically gain large following. Like, I've seen adoptive parents and foster parents that will post one or two videos and will instantly get like 30K followers, 100K. And then soon after, not even a few months in, they'll have millions of followers following every single aspect of their lives. And it's not just the adoptive parents' lives. These are children that have entered your family through a trauma. And adoption at its root, no matter how good the circumstances are now, adoption starts with family separation. And no matter how well adjusted and how loving that adoptive family is, that doesn't erase that. And now you are putting a camera in a kid's face from before they even enter your home, oftentimes, where you're talking openly about the subject. And oftentimes people will ask you, well, are you open to kids with disabilities? What age range? What race? Oh, are you looking to foster? Are you looking to adopt from foster care? Oh, like, what issues are you going to deal with? All these intrusive questions, and people forget you're talking about actual children here. And so I am really, really not for adoption influencers. And that's a much larger discussion too, with just parent influencers in general. And I actually just wrote an article for the Daily Beast about some adoption influencers and how people are now profiting off of adopting a child on the internet, and they're posting links that will give them kickbacks to outfits on Amazon and baby bottles and a baby gear, and all while showing you a day in the life of a foster mama. And they're posing it as something innocuous, as something cute and fluffy and feel good. But at the end of the day, you're profiting off of someone's worst day, worst circumstance. And people are applauding you for it publicly, very publicly.
What's your response to people's retort of, well, it's my life too. I'm just documenting my life, and this child is part of my life?
I think that is a very tricky question, but I understand it. And I think it's similar to like children with disabilities. I myself had chronic health issues from when I was a child to now. I have invisible disabilities, and I struggled with that. And I can just imagine like my mom, like going to all these doctor's appointments and wanting a community, and then seeing if she was in this day and age, she could have just posted a picture to Facebook and said like, oh, well, my kid keeps having migraines and she's really struggling with school, putting all this information out because it's part of her life. But at the end of the day, it's one aspect of her life from a privileged position. As a parent, you can make these choices. You can better see it. Your brain is more developed than a child. And so now I have two sons. One has autism, and I go through struggles with him, just like I go through struggles with my other son. But choosing to post publicly about his life is taking advantage. And I wouldn't do that because I'm not going to take advantage of my kid. I can share that, oh, I barely got sleep last night because my kid was up. But you can do it in ways where you're not oversharing. And like, I really discourage becoming an adoption influencer, mom influencer in whatever regard. But there are ways to go about it that protect the children's story. So you can do like a day in the life of me getting ready to parent, your outfit choices, this and that. You don't have to include little aspects of your children's fates or behavioral issues, the tantrums, this and that. There are ways to make it more ethical, if you will. And a good example of that is Gina Wilder at Hey the Wilders. She's on Instagram, she's on TikTok, and she has an adopted child, and she makes sure not to share things that would take advantage of the child. And so I think that's a good example of like what to do versus what not to do.
Because you're a mom too, so you completely understand and empathize with people that want to just share their story as a mother, as a father. And a lot of people don't understand that when they hear your perspective of just, you have a well-rounded perspective. You actually know what they're going through. Can you give me more examples of ways that people can healthfully share their experience as an adopter? Because people are going to do it. It's another thing of like, they want to do it, they're going to do it. So how can we steer them towards a path that is more ethical? How can we steer them towards a path that protects the child, not only on social media, but in conversations? My mom growing up used to overshare because she's very gregarious, and she, even to this day, like, people go to her to find out what's happening with me, and it drives me crazy still because I'm a very private person. And so I would prefer that people just ask me, and then I can tell you whether I want to tell you the information or not. But to ask my mom, who will tell you because she just likes to talk, and she knows this about herself, it's it's frustrating for me. So how in everyday life can we preserve the sanctity and privacy of these children?
I think like treating it like any other child, just from the get go. So say, um, for example, I'm gonna use my mom using me as an example. So let's say I was like 6 years old. My mom had adopted me a few years prior, and she decided to post to social media. I think like posting a family picture, like, oh, look, we went pumpkin picking today. And then someone sees me, sees how my mom looks different than me, and then starts asking intrusive questions like, oh, that's your daughter? Are you her real mom? This and that. It's when those questions start happening, that's when you have the power to either shut things down that aren't appropriate or overshare and put your child's information out there for the world. So someone could make a response video and be like, oh, well, I adopted my daughter from Colombia because her mom did X, Y, and Z, and she was addicted to X, Y, and Z. She's a horrible person, whatever. Or there's a difference between acknowledging and sharing parts of your story in a respectful way. So she could say, she's my daughter. I adopted her. That's it. You don't owe people an explanation, and you definitely don't owe your child's trauma to a random person on the internet just because they're curious. So I think like taking that and like treating social media like you would with any other child that you would if you carry them yourself is a good starting point, because just like with a biological child, you need to worry about social media predators. You need to worry about oversharing information about health, mental health, physical health, and that is involved with adopted children as well. And so I think centering your posts, try to focus on you yourself, and if it's about your family, make sure it's information that is okay to share. So like you would never share your child's school. You should never share the circumstances about your child's placement that was very private, like unless that child is an adult and now sharing themselves. Another example is like something people talk about all the time that they shouldn't is open adoption struggles. So if you are in an open adoption and you are struggling personally with that birth parent, and you come on the internet and say this birth parent is doing X, Y, and Z, and that's hurting me, that's hurting my kid, and you're talking down about that birth parent publicly because it's your story too, you're not realizing how this is going to affect your child. What if they see that video down the line? What if they overhear you talking about their birth parent in that way? How are they going to think about themselves? So if you wouldn't be comfortable with someone talking about that information about you, if you were in those shoes, you should not be posting it online at all.
I want to get to the other work that you're up to. But first, I just want to address semantics, because this has been an issue in my life of well-meaning people say, oh, well, I have the same issue with my sister too. So the issues that you have with this sibling is similar to a real sibling. What do you think about that lingo? Because I've heard that and it made my heart stop a little. A real sibling. And that kind of language is why I wrote my play Pretended, because it just harkens back to, are we pretending all of this? Is none of this real?
Right?
Do I get out of it? If it's the Truman Show, can I swim to the edge of it and get out of it? Like, what's happening here? So let's talk semantics.
I feel like phrasing like that is just used to minimize adoptees' experience and foster youth experience. Because if we're not real, like your real parents, oh, are those your real parents? So that's downplaying our adopted parents that have been there for us, hopefully throughout our entire lives, basically. Our real siblings, like my brother who was adopted a few years after me, who grew up in the same family. He's my brother. He's not like what makes him real, what makes him fake, like just because we're not biologically related. And like saying that minimizes our relationship. Like I grew up with him, I helped change his diapers, I made sure he didn't get in trouble. I was there when people bullied him at school, and he's just as much my real sibling just as my biological siblings are. And I think when people they find it so hard to just conceptualize what it means to be adopted and completely taken out of your biological family. And then how can someone possibly love their adopted family and their birth family? And it's like this either or thinking that I think contributes to language like that, that minimizes our experiences. And so like I really don't like phrasing like that, because I feel like it's up to each adoptee to put a label on how we view our biological relatives, and nobody else should be telling us how to feel. And when other people, friends and family, will say things like that, it's kind of like they are taking ownership of our stories by minimizing that, because they can't figure it out themselves. And they're just going on the prominent narrative of adoption, which is to make birth family typically look worse and minimize those connections and the importance of them and how healthy they can be and how beautiful it can be. And it's like with phrasing now, like with families that are broken up by divorce, you have step parents, you have the original parent, and like adding step can make that parent feel like less than. Saying like real family, real sister, that also puts that like distance in between.
I also think that it allows and justifies bad behavior in adoptive families. Because when we compare and contrast in a way that says, oh, that happens in real families too, that's still not okay. It's not okay in this situation, and it's not okay in that situation. So let's not justify it and say with the umbrella term that families just act this way, because that's not true. And that hopefully we can all learn to behave better, whether we're in adoptive families or in our birth family's presence. So that was something that I felt when I heard that. I was just like, let's not justify bad behavior at all.
Yeah.
You've been up to so much, Melissa. Let's talk about your other books. Can you just let us know, give us the list. What have you been doing? What are you up to next?
Well, since we met during our initial like interview back here, I wrote another book. It's the follow up to What White Parents. It's the workbook. So it's kind of like a separate. You could read it separately or you could read it together, but it's the companion to What White Parents Should Know About Adoption. And I actually collaborated with Marcella Boslow, a licensed social worker, and she did the forward as well as notes throughout to help take activities to the next level and help parents like think of it from a lens, a therapeutic lens. And so it will take what you know and really put you to the test by having you answer these deep questions, whether you just adopted or thinking about adoption or adopted a while back. And it will encourage like the deeper, difficult conversations with your partner or family members to understand identity, saviorism, implicit bias, as well as learn about the importance of mental health care for adoptees and for yourself as well. And it has a bunch of resources in it. And I am really excited. It'll be out in July on the 18th, 2023. And it's currently available for pre-order. And yeah, so I'm going to be starting like publicity for that in the next few months before it comes out. And I am very, very excited to see how people receive it. I think it'll be a great tool. And I've been told by like agencies that they have never seen anything like it before. So fingers crossed, more people will read it and learn and grow. And in the back burner, I'm working on my memoir and some other works, but nothing official yet. I'm working with my agent, so hopefully things will sell soon.
Well, I know I will be getting a copy of both. And I love to purchase copies of the adoptee books that from those that come on the podcast and even those that are out in the world. But I'm all about supporting you all. And I'm so excited for you. This sounds like an amazing endeavor. And my final question, the question that I ask every guest, I've changed it slightly from the last time we spoke because I want to make it more immediate, more present for folks and inspire them in the space that they are in now. So where are you being courageous in your life right now, Melissa?
I think I'm being courageous by really putting myself first in my own personal adoption story, because so often I've put like my adopted parents and their wants and their needs first, and then it was my siblings when I found them, and then it was my birth mother. And so lately I've been kind of taking charge of like the connection and what would be best for me. So I am not pushing myself to call when I'm having a bad day or like avoid topics. Like if something is really bothering me and I need to ask like a sibling, like, oh, well, why didn't you do this? Or like, did this really bother you too? Learning this aspect of our adoption story, like, did that bother you? Instead of just being like, oh, well, how are you doing? Like, what's going on with you? And like prioritizing other people's needs and also asking for help too. So I think taking that step after, like, this is my job, like day in and day out. I'm talking about adoption every single day on my social media, in my writing. It's so easy to forget to prioritize how to keep my mental health happy and to prioritize my needs. So I've been trying to do more of that and just taking little baby steps by asking for help from my siblings. And me and my sister Jess, we've gotten really close. And so we text almost every single day. And the other day, like, it was really refreshing to be like, hey, like, we had to put off our visit to Colombia and I'm feeling really bummed out about it. And normally I would never even say that because I wouldn't want to put that on them. I wouldn't want them to feel bad. I wouldn't want them to worry about me. I'm used to being the protector and the mom of the group, as I was the oldest sibling in my adoptive family. So I'm used to like taking care of like the younger ones. And now I'm the middle child and I'm kind of learning my place and how to interact with every aspect of my family.
Another beautiful episode. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to my guest today. If you liked this episode, the best way to support me and this work is to write an iTunes review, a 5-star review. This helps us reach the top of searches and helps more people to find us. And if you personally want to connect, please reach out on Instagram or Facebook. And I have some great resource material on my website at laniceantoineshelley.com. So go on over there too. Until next we meet, go gently and have courage, my love.